what are you comfortable sharing about Shannon Stillwell's reaction to all this? Have you talked to him? How did he find out about the recusal?
So I cannot speak to that. What I will say is that I met Shannon in the early spring of 2022. And you can just imagine, everyone sees me and they say, "Oh, Max, I'm not envied. We're not envied for being involved in a 2-year case." And I get that, and I appreciate the support of the bar and other people that have shown me a lot of support and love. But when you think about these young men that have been on trial now for since Mr. Stillwell's been in custody for 28 months, something like that at this point, and have been coming to trial, been brought to the courthouse. And that's a tough life to live for this long for these gentlemen and have their life completely on pause. So I'm sure we are happy that we're seeing some movement, but there can't really be any satisfaction until people are free. And that's what I'll say. And it's still a rough situation that Shannon's in and the rest of these gentlemen until we have a conclusion to this case.
Right. Because we could possibly expect motions for bail under the new judge. At least, Doug Weinstein's looking at that, but there's no guarantee that anything's going to be granted. There needs to be some kind of adjudication to this case for him to really be free and continue on. Right.
Right. So this is one step, but speaking for myself, I'm not doing any victory laps or anything like that because there's a lot of work to be done. This is just one step.
Yeah. And are you going to file a motion for bond? I know we were talking about how this is up in the air and it remains to be seen what's going to happen, but is that one thing you can say, or does that remain to be seen?
That remains to be seen. There are other motions that I would like to argue first before we even get to that. Arguing bond would presuppose that this prosecution is continuing, and I'm not willing to concede that is in fact what's going to happen. We're going to have to sort that out first.
Yeah. Has there been any talk about when you might be back in court? Has there been any word from the prosecutors, or you don't meet and confer, I don't think, but there's been no movement from them.
I might learn from an Instagram post or a tweet or an X, whatever we're calling it now, from you. I don't know anything regarding the scheduling that you don't know at this point.
Yeah. Well, what we were at, we were with Woody's testimony when this was all going on. We had maybe a couple more days of direct from him than we were going to get into cross. But how much more of the prosecution's case remains here? Are we about halfway through, or is a little less?
I think if you go by the witness list, every time I think that things are going to speed up, they slow down. So I think we're probably about halfway done with the case at this point. With Mr. Copeland's testimony, I don't know. I don't know where they're going, but I will say this, if you would allow me, about Mr. Copeland. I don't know Mr. Copeland. I'm not friendly with Mr. Copeland, but one thing I'll say about Mr. Copeland that I've appreciated is I believe that somehow throughout this process, he's gotten through to the press, the public, hopefully the jurors, that kind of the behind the scenes of what happens in the criminal justice system, what happens in the interrogation room, the idea that, you always view me as a liar until I say what you want me to say. And then all of a sudden I'm telling the truth. And that's a dirty little secret about our system,
Yeah.
that somehow, and I can't really explain how, but somehow Mr. Copeland has been the vessel to get that message across. And I think that message is coming across clear to many people in the public, and I appreciate that. I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, and especially he's building off kind of a string of remarkable witnesses. I mean, D'Angelo White stands out to me. We didn't get to see him on camera, which is one thing I was reminded of. Somebody in the comments was asking about jail conditions for the defendants. And, when the cameras turn on, they're all just there in their street clothes. And, we miss the transport process, which I know is such an exhausting process. At least people who work in the courts around here always tell me that they prefer it if the defendants are out of custody, because doing a trial with in custody defendants is so much more harder logistically. What are we missing in terms of transport? I mean, what is their morning like when they're being transported to court? You guys arrive 8:39, and are they in the holding cells, or how does that work?
I don't want to comment on the where any of the gentlemen are coming from, or how anyone gets to court. I don't want to comment on that at this time.
Sure.
That makes sense.
But
I'll just say this: it's going through this process. I'm thinking of my worst enemy, if I have one. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Going through this process. And as I said, it's been a long 2+ years for those 6 gentlemen that are at trial. And, I said in the beginning of this case to other lawyers, I said, our system is so broken that we're not going to all be tried together, because these other gentlemen are not going to have lawyers in time. The state that is charging people with crimes is not going to provide people with lawyers in time. And then I'm hearing, 2 years later, after arrest, the other gentlemen that have been severed, some of them are just getting their attorneys now, or still haven't received attorneys. And I'm like, what are we doing? What are we doing? I think Judge Dempsey's in charge of that group of individuals, and I'm sure he's working hard. It's not his fault, but we sit here and I'm not taking anything away, but Brittney Griner was in Russia, and everyone was concerned about her rights, and as we should be. But here in Georgia, we're sitting here and we're just completely ignoring the fact that individuals. I was retained. Okay, so luckily my client had the resources to hire an attorney relatively quickly. But individuals that don't have those resources have been languishing in 901 Rice Street for 2 years without an attorney to come talk to them about anything. I can't even imagine that. And that's where we're at.
Yeah, that definitely seems wrong. I was watching the last, it was a potential change of plea, but nobody ended up taking a plea deal with it. It had to have been Judge Dempsey. And he mentioned that there was a real lack of available attorneys capable in the defense bar of taking this. And there's something to be said about the pipeline for people who want to be attorneys who would like to work in criminal defense work in Georgia. But it seems like your public defender's offices aren't funded very well. So the options for getting started and getting experience are a little more limited there. Is that part of the problem?
I think the problem is funding. And I believe that, how can I put this? I believe that there's some attorneys that are willing to get involved for a short term, if they're looking for work, but then it quickly becomes apparent, at least with complicated cases, to really handle the case we'd want you to. The funding does not make any sense, and then that person says, okay, well, I'm gonna, I'm changing jobs, or I have a new career opportunity, so I'm going to withdraw in the case. And there's nothing that the Public Defender Standards Council can really say to them at that point. And then, people get, passed around. And so it's not just this case. I've represented people. I've been asked to take cases for people that have been locked up for, over a year without any meaningful legal assistance. Now, the Public Defender Standards Council might have someone in there to show up to court, but not to really actively represent them. It's kind of a placeholder, and it's just unconscionable. And I don't know why we stand for it, but and that's why I thanked you for shining light, you and your colleagues for shining light on what's going on in our trial, because that was happening for several years before anyone realized what was going on. I knew what was going on. I talked about it. I said it was horrible, but who am I? And so the press started to catch up on that, I'd say about 2 years ago, about the people languishing in Rice Street without any representation. And then supposedly changes were made, but obviously the changes didn't go far enough because we're still in a situation.
Now, where is the U.S. Department of Justice in relation to this? Has there ever been a patterns of practices investigation into Fulton County or anything like that?
I have no idea about that. But, it's a shame because, on an individual level, we always we see a press release, someone, wrongfully convicted man released after 30 years. And it'll get thousands and thousands of likes on Instagram. Oh, we love that. Oh, justice fun. But we don't want to do it, the work that needs to be done on the front end to make sure that next person is not wrongfully convicted. And, I don't get it, but we need to do something about it.